If you don't know me, there we go. My name is Crystal Young, and I'm the Executive Director of Utah Cultural Alliance. I want to give a special shout out to Ernesto and Ruth on our team, who are awesome, and Miles, who are awesome colleagues who do help accomplish all the work that we do to create a friendly environment in which creativity can best transform lives. And I want to thank all of you who are our members, who help fund and invest in our work and who provide the real magic of the business of living. So thank you to all of you. So now I'm going to share my screen. Oh, dang it. I have a Zoom problem. Ernesto, will you pull up the industry update actually and see if you can share it? Do you have the link readily available?
Yes, one moment.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm on a temporary computer because mine died, and it is being sent out and gone for a week in the middle of this session. There we go. All right. Ernesto, will you advance to the next two slides, please?
This one?
All right. Yep. This is the purpose of our work, creating a funding and policy environment which creativity best transforms lives. Next slide. So today I'm going to go through this little overview of what we're going to go through today, our funding and policy priorities as set by our 501c4 board, Utah Cultural Alliance board. And thank you to all of our board members and our chair, Joshua Stavros, who are on this call. And then I'm going to go into a few details about our funding priorities, and then a few details about our policy priorities. We'll share how you can help, provide some funding talking points and data, and then lastly, answer any questions you may have about our priorities today. And we're always happy to hear from all of you, our members, about what your needs are. So next slide, please. So here are our top 5 funding priorities for the 2023 legislative session. I'm going to go into these in more detail, but really briefly, $5 million ongoing is our top priority for the Arts and Museums grants. This is the general operating grants that all of you apply into, that opens every 2 years. And that application is open right now, by the way, with a very soon March deadline. Number 2 is focused on increasing our K-12 STEAM education programs. And I'll go into more detail of the requests that contribute to that number. Number 3 will be cementing the capital facilities grant. And again, I'll go into more detail about what that request is. And then number 4, the priority is historic rehabilitation. And there are kind of 2 options there that we'll talk through. And then our 5th priority is $375 one time, $375,000 one time for the state's art collection. That will include allowing them to be able to purchase a new truck to move the collection around the state. Next slide is our policy priorities. We are running a significant reform bill to kind of reform the mess that is the secondary ticketing market. That is Senate Bill 138. Just last week, I'm sure you guys saw in the news that the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is holding hearings. They held the first of what will be several hearings into this marketplace. And our own Senator Lee is on that committee, and we'll talk through all of that in a minute. Number 2, we're focused on several bills that impact school libraries. And again, I will talk about that in more detail. Number 3 is a bill editing the charitable solicitations permit, House Bill 119 from Representative Dunnigan. And then number 4 is the bill creating the historic rehabilitation tax credit, which has a cost attached to it. So that is why it is listed both as a policy priority, since it's a bill, and a funding priority. And then number 5 is working on a number of bills that impact tax policy generally in our world. So we'll also talk through that as we get through the meeting. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk through our funding details for our requests. Ernesto, if you could jump to the next slide, that'd be great. So just a little reminder on where we've been over time. You may recall that our arts and museums grants, which were once called art sustainability grants, were pretty static for at least 20, possibly 40 years at $1.4 million ongoing each year. And in 2019, the legislature started working with us on this shift to significantly increase the state's investment. So this timeline kind of shows what's happened in the succeeding years. Next slide shows where we are today. So the arts and museum grants are funded at $6 million ongoing, which is a 687% increase. The capital facilities was only funded one time last year and the year before, because this was the kind of the beginning baby steps of what the legislature might do there. And then heritage events is funded ongoing. This is a new grant category that was created last year to address kind of one-time special projects, not say you couldn't apply for, say, a season of events, but a one-time concert or festival that doesn't really fit in the general operating category could apply into heritage events, and you actually can apply into both categories. So I hope many of you applied into that when it first opened last year. Okay, next slide. So our number one priority, as we said at the beginning, is asking for $5 million ongoing to be added to that $6 million arts and museums grants category. This is in the governor's budget, with $1 million being listed in his budget as ongoing and $4 million one time. So our request as an industry is for that $5 million to be funded ongoing. And please reach out to the governor's budgeting staff and thank him for how generous he was to our industry in his budget. He listed a number of items important to our industry, including this. And this $5 million ask in 2023 is, next slide, part of our 5-year goal to get that arts and museums to $15 million. So where did we get that dollar amount? We announced this goal to y'all back in early November in partnership with our colleagues at Cultural Community Engagement and Utah Division of Arts and Museums. And this dollar amount came after listening to you all in a series of meetings and conversations over the summer, fall, and spring of last year, listening to what your needs were in terms of the amount of investment you needed from the state, and in terms of the amount of investment and purpose of investment for each of you. We do think possibly, if what we have heard from many of all y'all, that this dollar amount allows you to get the support that you need. $15 million annually could mean $500,000 a year for many of our kind of crown jewels of our industry, and still very significant amounts of money for everybody, and will be pretty important. And again, this dollar amount was reached at by speaking with all of you, asking you what you needed, what was an important amount of money in addition to what was needed, kind of tabulating and adding all of that as well. And so we hope that you're as excited about this goal as we are. Next slide, please. So now the education asks this year. So we have 3 wonderful cultural education and STEAM programs here in the state of Utah. Pops and IC was actually first funded in 1969. So that's an incredible heritage of support from our state. So this year's asks, the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program is asking for $9.8 million ongoing. That dollar amount allows them to expand that program into all schools. Pops is asking for $600,000 ongoing to allow the 3 provisional members to become what they call full-time permanent members of POP. So those 3 provisional members are Plan B Theater, Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art, and UMOCA, Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. And if the legislature funds this $600,000 ongoing for the 3 provisionals to become permanent members of POPs, the RFP is already funded ongoing. And so that would allow potentially the RFP to open up again for new members to apply into POPs. IC is not making a funding request this year. They did give their annual report this morning to the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee. Clark Planetarium brought a fun meteorite. It was pretty cool to watch their presentation. So again, it's a busy day on the Hill. Yes, we will send that out, Ken, in the chat, a listing of governor, staff, and key legislative figures. Send thank you encouragement messages. Thank you. We will do that very shortly. Next slide, please. So the proposal for capital facilities, and this is an idea that we float around to you all back in our November meeting. And the idea is that there be 2 tiers of options for you all that would be funded ongoing. So you'd be able to make plans over time. The smaller asks pool for requests less than $1 million could be used for a variety of uses, including getting larger projects kind of set up and going, kind of launching, as well as renovations, purchases, equipment upgrades, feasibility studies, design, drafting, architectural designs, et cetera, could all go into that smaller ask pool. The large ask pool would be for shovel-ready projects that have done all of the work that would be allowed in the smaller ask pool. The idea is that awards would be given in 2 payments. And so you would not need to have your match secured until you receive the second payment, rather than having your match secured at your application. There's thought of opening up the kinds of groups that could apply into it. So perhaps private development in partnership with nonprofits. That would allow you all to bring more partners into your projects. There's some thought of possibly increasing the match for government projects, for municipal governments, but everybody else would be matching the state's investment 2 to 1. Right now, the thought is that $8 million total is the ask for capital facilities. Right now, the smaller ask pool is the larger sized, $5 million ongoing, with $3 million ongoing in the large ask pool. There's some discussion of keeping the disbursement between the 2 sides a little more fluid. And so each year, cultural and community engagement could assess needs and then divvy up the $8 million between the 2 asks. The 2 sides of asked tiers, so to speak. Of course, need is greater than $8 million a year, but this is a starting point for a permanent capital facilities proposal, since this has only been the one-time kind of experiment to date. And so we would be growing it over time. And I will add, historically, the legislature rarely supports by line item more than $2 to $3 million requests annually. And hence, that's one of the several reasons why we got to that size for the large ask pool. But again, we're leaning towards allowing CCE having more flexibility with that based on need and demand. Next slide, please. So our 4th priority surrounds historic rehabilitation tax credits or a grant. So the governor in his budget recommended a $5 million grant pool for historic rehabilitation that would be administered by CCE, our Division of State History Preservation Office. Yes, these slides are actually available on our website right now already when you click on our advocacy page. So that $5 million grant would be something that developers, cities, nonprofits could apply into to address historic rehabilitation. We also have a bill coming from Representative Albrecht. It's not yet numbered. It's a little, they're slowly getting bills out there, but it should be listed any day. And so our current state historic rehabilitation tax credit, the state level income tax credit, is specific to residentially zoned properties. They can be commercially owned. So the bill would expand that state tax credit to include commercially zoned properties. The federal tax credit applies to both types of properties. That bill would also be a transferable tax credit. If you're curious at looking at the language, you can go online to look at Senate Bill 234 from last year's session, the 2022 session, because we're running the same bill again. We started it in the Senate last year, passed with only one no, and so overwhelming support, and then it was the second bill down on CNADA. And so we know how it plays out in the Senate, which is why we're starting it in the House this year. And the fiscal note for the bill is estimated to be $3 million impact to the state budget. And so the legislature kind of has the choice of how they want to fund and promote investment in historic rehabilitation to help these projects pencil out. And the tax credit is not capped at $3 million, so that's just the estimate for what they think that tax credit would cost. And who knows, maybe the legislature will invest in both the grant and the tax credit, which would be great. In speaking with the Historic Rehabilitation Committee kind of community, it really seems to depend on the project in question as to if a grant or a tax credit is better suited to making that investment pencil out, essentially. So that has been interesting to discuss with different developers and communities as well. Our fifth priority, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you, is $300,000 for the art collection and $75,000 for the art truck. So this is a one-time ask. We grouped them together for the $375,000. That $300,000 primarily allows Division of Arts Museums to invest in new software to keep their database for the art collection, as well as gives them some money to purchase new art. The state's budget is only $60,000 a year, actually. Since 2010, it's been at that level. And so we're pretty excited that the governor included in his budget money to increase that budget. Next slide. If you have any quick questions about the funding details, feel free to put them in the chat now, and I will move on to talking through the details of our policy priorities. Next slide, please. So Senate Bill 138 is online already. It's from Senator Scott Sandel. He's an amazing human being. This is fraudulent ticketing practice amendments. I'm actually negotiating this bill with some national players at 4:30 today. So some of the details that you see listed may change in substitute, but this bill is very important for addressing fraud in the secondary market. Utah has some good laws in place already, but what this bill will add is that secondary tickets must be disclosed as such in paid SEO listings, which is really great because, as you know, when you Google something, it's usually 10, 20 links before you actually get the real website, the primary ticket seller's website. And it's hard to differentiate between some of these secondary ticketing websites and some of the versus a primary ticketing website. Our bill improves some of the disclosures to help consumers better be able to tell if they're on a primary or secondary ticketing website, including with a pop-up when you get to a secondary ticketing website. At the checkout, a buyer has to confirm that they know they're buying a secondary ticket, because that's something we see a lot where they're positive they bought it from a primary seller like Artix, and then lo and behold, they didn't. And also these secondary ticketing websites can't use any intellectual property on their websites without permission. Our current state statute only bans them from using venue names in upper level domains. We're also requiring secondary ticketing sellers to state seat numbers. Speculative tickets have to be disclosed as speculative. That means a ticket seller listing tickets they don't own online, that's a speculative, that they don't own yet, is a speculative ticket. That's where a lot of fraud happens, because chances are the tickets they're promising you may not be available by the time you actually pay them, and then they go buy the tickets. So Utah, many states ban speculative tickets, but this would be kind of a middle ground approach if it would still be allowed, but it would have to be disclosed. And other things that our bill requires is that resellers must guarantee refunds to their buyer in the event of cancellation, if the ticket was fraud, if it didn't allow them entry, if the details didn't live up to what they promised, i.e. they say it's VIP front row seats and actually you're way in the back and it's obscured view. Resellers are on the hook for communicating entry and safety protocols. So that's things such as like if you require proof of, say, a COVID test or clear bags or no bags, things like that must be communicated, because again, that's something that we see a lot. There is currently a cap on fees of 25% for any tickets above $20 face value. And then one aspect that's very important is, while the act of selling a speculative ticket in the state of Utah not being able to deliver is currently defined as fraud. That is a bill we've run in the past on this issue. We're making that subject to the fines within the website Sales Act. So it's a slightly higher fine assessed to that kind of transaction. And then the Ticket Transferability Act, which passed a few years ago, that says that primary sellers must allow their tickets to be resold within certain percentages of their inventory has to be allowed to be resold. That act puts venues on the hook for reporting to consumer protections that they followed that law. And unfortunately, a lot of our venues are shells that a primary ticket seller or presenter is renting. And so therefore they don't have access to that ticketing data. And so our bill currently in Senate Bill 138 just cuts the reporting mechanism entirely. So again, some of these details may change after our negotiations this afternoon, but this is a really exciting and very important bill. I'll mention again briefly, the U.S. Senate last week conducted the first of what will be several meetings addressing problems in both the primary and the secondary ticketing market. The Taylor Swift kind of Ticketmaster mess was a big focus of a lot of that hearing, but they did also discuss the need for addressing fraud, increasing the federal government already bans bots and things, but kind of increasing some of the regulation and fines associated with that as well. The BOSS Act that was introduced in the 116th Congress, but then tabled during COVID, is likely to come back in some level. And Ernesto and I have been meeting with Senator Lee and his staff. He serves on that Senate Judiciary Committee, and educating them on kind of the complexity of this marketplace, what statutes exist in different states, and what is within Utah's bill as well. And he did a really great job addressing the complexity of this market and continues to be involved in that. So we'll continue to work with him in his office on that bill. So that's our Senate Bill 138. Next slide, please. So on the school library front, last year, it's been a pretty controversial, hot issue of, is there porn in school libraries, which is kind of silly, but we do believe in making sure that children have age-appropriate content and that they are protected from anything that is not appropriate for their ages. And so we have been working with our friends in the library community and with various bills impacting school libraries on some compromises and edits to their bill that still maintain intellectual freedom, but also keeping in mind age-appropriate content. We have some edits coming in a bill from Representative Ballard on online digital databases that kids have access to through school libraries. And we've been working with Representative Ivory on updates to his bill last year. And that bill last year required the State Board of Education to, sorry, what? Mute yourself if you don't have any questions, please. That'd be great. The bill last year from Representative Ivory required the State Board of Ed to pass a model policy that local school districts could implement if a book is called into question. The vast majority of it didn't require schools to have such a policy, and it didn't require that they have any kind of uniform policy between different school districts. Most school districts did pass policies since last year's session, and there's been some interim hearings on that topic. And I do know what will be in the proposal this year. It is not yet online yet. It actually is not finished being drafted yet. And we are working on a number of compromise edits to that as well. So that's the world of school libraries. Oh, there is also a background checks bill for school librarians that was run last year. And this year's version is actually much easier for our smaller libraries and rural libraries to implement. And we're likely to stay pretty neutral on that bill. And we thank Representative Johnson for really listening to libraries and their needs. Thank you. Yes, the background check bill is for public libraries, not school libraries. That's a whole different thing since they are school libraries. Thank you, Peter, for that clarification. Next is our charitable solicitation permit. This bill is available online, House Bill 119 by Representative Dunnigan. It will be coming through the Political Subdivisions Committee. We're actually negotiating that bill at 2 p.m. today. And so it is going to change a little bit. Where we are right now is Consumer Protections is doing a 3-month deep dive with some consultants who are reviewing every single permit and license that Consumer Protections requires of businesses to make sure that the need is still there and that the permit is doing what it needs to do. And in the event that it's not needed, recommending different permits and licenses be cut and/or changes to what is required in their permitting process. So they reached out to all of us involved in this House Bill 119 and asked, could we run a compromise this year to allow them time to do this deep dive and then come back next session with real edits to the charitable solicitations permit. We're likely to do that, but what we will be doing in this year's House Bill 119 is making it so that when any state grant program, including Division of Arts and Museums General Operating Grants is not required to have the permit on hand before you apply. And that's been an issue for some of our smaller nonprofits applying into that grant program who don't know that they need that grant. And it can take up to 2 months for your application to be approved by Consumer Protection. So that bill will be effective as soon as the governor signs the bill. So that can be in place for this general operating grant cycle that I believe closes on March 9th or 10th of 2023. We may this year simplify some of the information required in the permit renewal process. A lot of that Consumer Protections can do through rule instead of in statute, but that is where that bill is going. This bill has been kind of a problem for mostly our small nonprofits who it's a lot of work for them to fill out. They're required to submit additional information than do organizations who file 990s. And so this has been kind of a headache for a lot of our smaller festivals and nonprofits, and hence the reason for this bill. The next slide, please. Number 4 is again the bill attached to historic rehabilitation that I chatted through before. Number 5 priority is various tax policy issues. So we always watch bills that deal with any of these kinds of taxes: property tax, income tax, sales tax, and then TRCC is the restaurant sales tax or TRAC. TRT is our hotel sales tax, and TRAC and TRT, many counties allow cultural nonprofits to apply for funding generated by those specific taxes to attract visitors to your entities. And so we always watch those to make sure that that is still allowed. We always watch sales tax bills to make sure that there are no impacts to local option sales tax in particular, which is the what our RAP taxes, our recreation, arts, and parks taxes are. And then income tax, they're very likely to pass a cut this year, which impacts the education fund. And so we watch and are part of negotiations for those. And then property tax as well can be a source of support for our industry. So far, everything is unimpactful in significant ways to our industry. And so nothing you need to be concerned about, but all relevant bills are in our bill tracker, which we'll put that link into the chat in a second. Next slide. So here's how you can help. Next slide. So, Cultural Advocacy Day that we do in partnership with all of our fellow statewide service cultural organizations is February 7th. We hope you're all coming. February 6th is the Evening of Magic legislative dinner to really showcase our industry before the legislature, and President Adams is receiving a Lifetime Cultural Achievement Award. And I can tell you that event is going to be really fun and just a really great way to showcase our industry. And last year we had to really limit attendance because of Omicron. And so we're excited that everybody can come now to both events. On February 7th, we will be releasing 2021 economic data, which is the partnership that we hold with Utah Division of Arts and Museums, Salt Lake County Arts and Culture, and Kem Garner Policy Institute compiles that economic data. And we'll be releasing that in a press conference with President Adams and Speaker Wilson that morning at 10:30 a.m. And attendees will also be delivering Cultural Champion Awards. There will be fun, hands-on, interactive displays in the rotunda for our legislature to take part in. You'll meet with legislators, and depending where our bills are in the process and appropriations in the process, you may be asked to speak with different legislators on different funding and policy requests. Uh, Most of the appropriation subcommittees that are funding priorities are going through intend to be prioritizing either before February 7th or on February 7th. So that part of the process is likely to be done by that point, but you never know up here. Things change every day. And then, of course, we do ask all of you to please thank decision makers for the support of the past, including the governor's budget recommendations, and advocate for these requests and what they mean to you. And as just like Ken asked, we will already contact information is on our website in the member portal. And it is sorted by committee, so you can see the different members of the relevant committees. And we will send you some recommended talking points, including the next slide. Here's some highlights. We, of course, always recommend you personalize impact to your organization when you send these thank you notes and requests for the 2023 priorities. This is the next bullet point is our 2020 economic data, 9% of GDP and 1 in 12 jobs. So just keep in mind after February 7th, we'll have different numbers public. You might want to mention that in the previous line item process, only about 14 orgs were funded annually, and now 300 plus are served by those 3 grant programs. Those grant programs distribute 41% of their grants to rural Utah, which is really helping to get investment and our cultural industries growing across the state. The 3 grant programs protect taxpayer dollars and maximize legislative time. And you could include things such as there's a 73% reduction in RFAs since the grant programs were created. And definitely these grants provide stability amongst economic uncertainty coming in our future because of their general operating support. And so now I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Here's some more economic impact slides or talking point slides if you want to include these, but you can exit the presentation, Ernesto. And are there any questions about funding priorities or policy priorities? Ernesto, could you please put in the chat the links to the member portal that lists legislative contact information in the bill tracker, as well as our advocacy page that lists our priorities, and links to a few other advocacy tools as well. The question from Gina. So on average, line items, which is an individual amount appropriated to a specific organization instead of a grant, which is what was allowed prior to the shift in 2019 and is no longer allowed for general operating requests or one-time special projects requests, but they are still allowing RFAs for capital projects currently. On average, prior to this shift to the state investing in grants, 14 were funded annually on average prior to this shift. Whereas the grant programs, the 3 grants, Arts and Museums, which is our general operating, capital, and then the heritage and special events, they now fund 300 plus. Your next question, applying, or are there new orgs? I'm not sure what you mean by the second half of that question, Gina. Feel free to clarify unless I answered that question for you. Any other questions? You guys are so quiet today. Are you happy about these priorities? Do they look good to you? I see some thumbs up. Great. This is a very exciting session. The governor's budget, again, was very generous. There's far more than even we presented to you today. We just don't want to overwhelm you with everything out there and really focus on these priorities that are most impactful for the industry. And again, thank you to all of you who've been part of all these conversations all summer, and fall and spring, who give us input into what you need and input into what we are promoting up here.
Thanks for
And
everything, Crystal.
Thank you for all the hard work.
thanks, everybody.
Do you guys recommend any other times besides February 6th for the legislative dinner and February 7th to like be up on the Hill to show our support for these things? Are there other dates that you can break out for us at all?
Yes, when our bills come before committee is a good time to, be up here and show support. And we'll be working with usually 2 or 3 of you to maybe actually testify and offer a few words of support, but we'll let you know when those bills are on committee and need a little extra support, as well as when those bills are coming to the floor. If we need extra assistance, whipping votes, things like that, we will reach out to you all for your help, and especially relying, of course, heavily on board members like you, Beth, when those come up. But because of the ever-changing sessions, setting days in advance for those is a little bit hard. We usually have a few days notice for when bills will be on committee. We encourage you to reach out to members of Business, Economic Development, and Labor before February 7th through email or calls, if you know those members personally, to express support for the $5 million ongoing for arts and museums grants, for the art collection request and the historic rehabilitation request, for the number 2 priority for cultural and STEAM K-12 education. We encourage you to reach out before February 7th to members of the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee as well. There are a few cultural facilities being built on university campuses that are being considered by the IGG Appropriations Subcommittee, such as the Cox Performing Arts Center at Utah Tech University down in St. George. And again, we will send you all some talking points for these requests if you want to advocate for any of those. But the universities, do their own work. Those are state-owned buildings. They're different than what goes through our capital facilities program. The capital facilities program is intended for buildings that are not owned by the state, whereas the state has its own process for the buildings that it builds. Any other questions? We have snazzy tools that help you easily write letters to legislators, so watch your email for that. If there's anything else you have questions about, again, you can go to the bill tracker tool to see all of the bills. I think we're now well over 24 bills that do impact our industry, and you can see all of them there. You can check the app every day for status. Or add them yourself to your own tracker in le.utah.gov. We review all of the usually 1,000+ bills that come out each session to make sure that none impact you. Sometimes it's things that seem as innocuous as last year, a bill meant to address what side of the street Walmart lands on in cities could have meant that anybody receiving a RAP tax investment from a city or county that has transactions subject to sales tax, such as concessions or gift shops, you wouldn't be able to receive RAP money anymore as that money. But luckily, we watch and read everything and negotiated you all out, so that bill did not impact you. Last year, we worked on a bill where we had to negotiate directly with the NRA to allow you all to bring shows who want to ban guns if you want to. And those negotiations were successful. And now that bill sponsor serves on our board. So you never know what's going to come up and never know how it's going to impact you. It's always exciting. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Again, free to stay on if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out, text or call us at any time with your questions. We thank all of you for your support. We thank all of you members who invest in our work. It is our honor every day to serve you all and help you better be able to do your job that transform lives, we hope. work accomplishes that for you all. Again, thank you so much, everybody, and especially those of you who serve on our board and go above and beyond.